The GV70 is Korean maker Genesis showing us what it believes a mid-sized premium badged SUV should be. It'll be a rare sight on our roads, but the right kind of customer might well like this car's beautifully finished, spacious cabin, assured driving dynamics and class-leading customer support package.
Let's assume that you're thinking of choosing a mid-sized premium badged SUV, but you want something different from the BMW X3s, Audi Q5s and Mercedes GLCs that your friends and business acquaintances drive. There are other options in this class from Volvo, Alfa Romeo and Lexus, of course, but none of them are quite as left field as the car we're going to look at here, the Genesis GV70. You probably won't have heard of it, or of the Genesis brand either, which is the posh division of the Hyundai motor group that's rapidly making a name for itself in the UK. The GV70 is the SUV version of the brand's G70, a BMW 3 Series size model offered in saloon or shooting brake estate forms. There's a larger GV80 SUV in the Genesis range if the GV70 isn't quite big enough, but we're guessing this car might suit a lot of people in this segment very well. And as with all Genesis models, it comes with a level of customer service backup that rivals can't approach. You'd expect a newcomer to this segment to be fully electrified, and sure enough, Genesis has a full EV version of this model to offer. Surprisingly though, the brand isn't providing the hybrid and PHEV technology it has access to from its parent group. So the petrol and diesel variants most customers will initially choose are resolutely old tech. That customer care programme, though, will make up for a lot. And we're promised a cabin with design and quality to shame the established premium brands. Does it all add up to a contender you really need to consider in this segment? Well, you'll need the industry's most comprehensive car review, the Car and Driving Road Test, to find out. So what's it like? Well, you get seated to a little jingle and light graphics flash at you from both dashboard screens as the seats and wheel power into place around you in a Lexus-like touch. Press the start button and both virtual dial needles perambulate around, then settle in readiness as the engine fires, with quite a sporty note if you've chosen the 2.5 litre petrol model we're trying here. It all sounds quite promising. Whatever GV70 powertrain choice you've decided upon, petrol, 2.2 litre diesel or even full electric, a few things impress themselves upon you over the first few miles. The first is that though this isn't the brand's largest SUV, it's still nearly 2 metres wide and tips the scales at around 2 tonnes. Size and heft you really sense on narrow roads and through steering, pedal and body movements, though in a nicely controlled and comfortable way. Comfort indeed seems to have been the overriding priority in developing the drive dynamics here. As you can feel by the way that this Genesis deftly handles porous surfaces, but also through the way it wafts and lopes across the crests and dips of typical major and secondary routes. As a result, at speeds through the turns, there's significantly more body roll than you'd get in this segment in, say, a BMW X3 or a Porsche Macan. But at the same time, the GV70 manages to feel more interesting to punt along than most of the other premium contenders in this class. That's partly because the standard four-wheel drive system's very effective in applying cornering torque exactly where it's needed, and also partly because the steering's actually more feelsome than is usual for a car of this class. But it's primarily because Genesis hasn't needed to soften the springs to an extreme level to achieve this near class-leading level of ride. Nor has the brand developed an air suspension system. You'll need a top-spec Audi Q5 in this segment for that. Instead, this GV70's party piece, standard across the range, is what the company calls electronic control suspension adaptive damping, which does a bit more than just alter ride quality with drive mode. Instead, as with the similar system used by the slightly smaller DS7 Crossback in the segment below, It employs a front-facing camera to read the road surface ahead, automatically priming the adaptive dampers to reduce body movement and wheel impact over bumps and undulations. It works really well over speed humps. And at a cruise on the highway if you select the Comfort Drive mode, one of 4 tarmac drive settings provided. The others are blue-themed Eco, orange-themed Sport, and rather ambitiously, Sport Plus, which can be had with the accompaniment of the brand's active sound design, oral theatrics through the audio speakers. Even the selection screen for this latter feature, with admirable honesty, describes it as a synthetic engine sound and wisely gives you the option to either minimise it or turn the thing off, which you might want to do on this petrol model, because on its own, as we suggested at startup, the 4-cylinder turbo 2.5 litre unit actually sounds quite sharp, with 300 bhp plus a meaty 422 newton metres of torque on offer, along with a raspy warble that builds up as you throttle through the revs. Get quick with the paddles for the smooth shifting standard 8-speed auto gearbox, and the rest to 62 mph sprint can be dispatched in just 6.1 seconds, while the 50 to 75 mph overtaking increment occupies just 4.4 seconds, all en route to a maximum of 149 mph. All of which might be good enough to tempt you if it weren't for this green pump variant's rather prodigious running costs. So if you're sold on the idea of a GV70 and want to keep your asking price budget within reasonable bounds, you might need rather reluctantly to turn instead to the alternative diesel model. For reasons that frankly confuse us, Genesis has chosen to give a further stay of execution to the 2.2 litre, 4-cylinder, 206 bhp diesel unit that lesser Hyundai Motor Group brands are already phasing out in favour of electrified full hybrid and PHEV plug-in hybrid petrol powertrains. Either of those would have suited this GV70 just fine, fitting better with the current zeitgeist, but possibly would have made it more expensive than Genesis wants its car to be in its most affordable forms. So for the short term anyway, it's diesel drive for the foot of the range, a unit that pulls like a train, works well with the 8-speed auto shifter and makes 62 mph from rest in 7.9 seconds en route to 133 mph. Perhaps more usefully, you might employ this engine's 440 Nm torque figure to tug along up to 2.5 tonnes, a braked towing load capacity applicable to both combustion engines. The diesel model might be a slightly better choice in the unlikely event that you might be regularly taking this Genesis off a paved surface. To cater for that eventuality, the brand provides a separate set of terrain driving modes for snow, mud and sand, plus there's a downhill descent control to ease you down slippery slopes. Ultimately though, as with most rivals in this class, your progress over gnarlier trails will be limited not by traction, but by this Korean model's very modest level of ground clearance. Both the fossil-fuelled power plants are impressively quiet, but of course nothing like as silent as the third powertrain option that Genesis is offering, that for the fully electrified version of this model. The electric GV70 can also drive all 4 of its wheels, but as with any such EV, does so rather differently, with separate motors driving each axle collectively, generating a rather impressive combined output of 483 bhp and 700 Nm of torque. That's good enough to power the car to 62 mph in 4.5 seconds, which, to give you some class perspective, is over half a second quicker than a rival Mercedes EQC. Of more interest, though, to a lightly owner is the projected driving range between charges, WLTP rated at a fairly unremarkable 249 miles between charges of the 77.4 kWh battery. We mentioned refinement. Special noise-cancelling technology on the EV variant improves that, reducing tyre roar by using microphones and sensors to project inverted sound waves through the audio speakers. You'll also appreciate the electrified GV70's smart regenerative braking system, which analyses your driving habits and road conditions to alter the level of energy recuperation. Or you can maximise that manually and select a one-pedal style driving mode that'll see you hardly ever having to use the brake, so abrupt is off-throttle deceleration. This EV model also gets an e-terrain driving mode to handle slippery surfaces. But it's the SmartStream combustion engines that are our focus here, which feel very well suited to the kind of car this is. You might be too. The GV70 is smooth, comfortable and properly plush. It'll be quite a rare sight on our roads, but for the right kind of driver, a very premium kind of mid-sized SUV experience awaits. The V in the model name here stands for versatile, and the styling cues that mark out the Genesis brand's first wave of European models are certainly that, replicated on all of them. Luke Donkervolker, the company's chief creative officer, calls this design philosophy athletic elegance. You might call it almost Bentley-esque from the front, where, as usual with the brand, there's this enormous, hatched, so-called crest grille, which seems to have been borrowed straight from Crew, but which the Korean maker insists is thoroughly unique. More distinctly Genesis are these trademark LED quad headlamps, creating a frontal visage that at first glance seems identical to that of the larger GV80 model. Actually though, everything below grille level is distinct to this GV70, primarily these wide gaping corner cutouts and the shiny black finishing that decorates the bottom of the lower intake. The 4.7 metre long profile perspective is the one that best illustrates this mid-sized crossover model's distinct identity, mainly because the swept-back coupe-style roofline and this unusual arching parabolic line which begins at the top of the quad lamps and angles steeply back down through the doors to disappear somewhere in the rear wing. The C-pillar's dropping chrome line down below the D-pillar quarter light is another nice touch. And of course there are big wheels, 19 inches in size, with 21 inches available at the top of the range. We think the rear is possibly the GV70's most appealing angle. These twin-strip LED tail lights featuring the same ultra-thin signature as the quad lamps up front. The G-Matrix patterned bumper and lower diffuser are eye-catching too, flanked at either corner on combustion versions by these big exhaust pipes, square on the diesel or, as here, circular with the 2.5 litre petrol model. As usual though, what's more important is what you can't see, and what Genesis claims is one of the strongest body structures in the segment. With an integrated monocoque design that optimises weight and improves overall stiffness by reducing the number of required strengthening parts for the platform and body. Not sold yet? Well, Genesis reckons you will be by the time you take a seat inside the plush cabin. So let's take a look now. From its genesis, this Korean premium marque has been one primarily targeted at the American market, something you could probably guess from a glance at the plush, stateside-like front-of-cabin experience being served up here. For a start, if you know your brands, you might need to look twice at the winged steering wheel badge to confirm you're not in a big Chrysler. And there's lots of silver trim and leather finishing, though not of the deep, lustrous sort that would deliver the Bentley-style feel promised by the exterior. You can get a bit creative with the cabin colours, though, notably with the rather extrovert Sevilla red theme chosen here. You can't imagine that in an X3 or a Q5, can you? More sober treatments are, of course, available. Genesis says the design here was inspired by the beauty of white space concept used in traditional Korean architecture, and there are certainly some nice design touches. The oval aircraft wing style motif, chosen for the mid-level fascia controls that stretch either side of the broad steering wheel, and this smart silver strip that starts in the doors and then flows around the dash, widening to allow slim black vents either side of the instrument binnacle and in front of the passenger. Wood is noticeable by its absence. Instead, smart double-stitched faux leather decorates the upper and lower sections of the fascia. Plus, there are silver pedals, and the cool metal inserts at the end of the column stalks feature bamboo weave knurling. You'll want to consider the option of these backlit door trimming panels that illuminate with the ambient lighting through aluminium inserts in a pleasing pattern. And if you opt to add this car's Napa leather upholstery, you get diamond quilting and contrast stitching too. This is high-end stuff. Talking of options, the first box almost all Genesis customers tick is the one for the extra cost innovation pack, because without it you spoil the instrument binnacle with old-fashioned dials and a smaller 8-inch screen. With that pack installed, there's this much more satisfying 12.3-inch TFT display, which changes its colour with the selected drive mode and illuminates with a gentle 3D effect you can reduce or turn off completely if you find it's making you feel sick, an unfortunate byproduct of the same technology in the current Mercedes S-Class that's not so prevalent here. It would have been more useful if the designers had created a display able to bring mapping into the binnacle. Unlike the screens fitted to rival models in this segment, this one can't. What it can do is activate left and right side rear view cameras in the virtual dial spaces when you indicate, which is rather cool. Otherwise, all you can do is decide what info to select between those two virtual dials. And there's quite a selection. You can have a drive assist graphic, or a compass, or a trip computer info, a digital speedo and attention level readouts, a speed limit system, tyre pressure data, real-time four-wheel drive display, and readouts on oil temperature, torque and turbo pressure. Along the bottom of the monitor is an MPG meter, flanked either side by an overcrowded line of data covering range, temperature, MPG, driving mode and mileage. The centre screen for everything else you might need to know isn't where it would normally be in the middle of the centre stack, partly because a neat little display for climate functions has been fitted there instead, and partly because it wouldn't fit, being of a simply huge 14.5-inch size. So, this expansive monitor has instead been mounted up on top of the dash, rather too far away to easily use its provided touch functionality, which is why, rather strangely, the designers have had to separate out its lower shortcut buttons onto this easily smeared silver plastic button panel below the climate screen. As an alternative to using these, there's the usual voice-controlled functionality, and just below, a smart white glass-topped circular infotainment controller, a welcome copy of the BMW iDrive system we wish more brands would emulate. Anyway, the infotainment screen itself is the usual modern-era Hyundai Motor Group setup with two styles of homepage. Either a picture with a temperature readout fading into navigation mapping, or you can swipe across to a screen full of selectable tiles backed by wallpaper styles you can vary to preference, with coloured fonts you can alter between copper and copper rust. Yes, rust, really? Well, anyway, as well as the usual mapping, navigation, media, audio and phone sections, there's one for a suite of Genesis Live features, info on traffic, filling stations and parking along your route, and another for Genesis connected services, including weather forecasts, a calendar that can synchronise with your Google or Apple account, and a sports section that, rather neatly, you can set up to follow recorded scores from your favourite team. Other useful touches include a voice memo feature, a quiet mode, which shuts off the speakers in the back, and a valet mode function that enables you to turn off certain features to protect personal information, should the car be being used by someone else. Further protection could be added at extra cost with the addition of screen activation via a fingerprint reader. Enough on screens, let's switch to the seats, which include lumbar support and are very nice indeed, but aren't positioned very commandingly, which you may dislike if you want to see above the hedgerows, or prefer if you like to feel sporty. Reach for the power operation buttons, and a little graphic of what adjustment switch you're touching appears on the centre screen before you move anything, which is a lovely touch. Ideally, you'd stretch to the optional ventilated 18-way adjustable ergo motion chairs we're trying here, which are approved by the Action Gesunder Rücken EV, the German campaign for healthier backs, and are of the active sort with individual air cells that clamp you in more tightly at speed through the turns, according to selected drive mode and cornering style. Everything falls to hand quite nicely, rather too nicely in the case of this infotainment controller, which you'll constantly be mistaking for the rotary gearshift controller for the first few weeks you own the car, an annoying and rather basic design oversight. Curiously, the drive mode button's separated away from the gear dial in a button here at the base of the centre stack. Not all the trimming is actually as nice as it first appears. While some of the silvered aluminium finishing feels real across this lower console, for instance, much of it is simply silver sprayed plastic, hence the disappointing tactility of the door catches, the gear shift paddles and the steering wheel embellishment. Talking of plastic, some odd decisions have been made with these. Soft touch finishes are pretty much everywhere you touch, and even in some strange places like the bottoms of the doors. But unwelcome hard plastics feature to a surprising great extent in larger areas of the centre console, the steering wheel and the dash. Overall though, fit and finish standards are very good. Not quite Audi, BMW or Lexus level perhaps, but better we think than you'd find from Jaguar or Mercedes, a pretty good showing from a first-time class entrant. Despite the fact that you're not seated particularly loftily, your view out over the long, rippling bonnet is good, with visible edges that help you place the car, plus sideways visibility is fine and the rear D-pillars have windows to alleviate what would otherwise have been a fairly nasty blind spot. Reversing's easy anyway, not only because all-round sensors and a parking camera are standard, but also because of a neat trick that sees the reversing lights illuminate lines on the ground behind the car, making it easier to see curbs in the side mirrors. What about space to store things? Well, the slim illuminated door bins are quite small, and glance up at the touch-sensitive overhead lights and you'll note that the overhead sunglasses compartment you get in a GV80 is missing here. The glove box, which incorporates a pen clip, is mainly taken up by a bulky handbrake you don't really need because said document is electronically accessible from a tile on the infotainment screen. Twin cup holders sit in the centre console, ahead of which is a cubby lidded with such a satisfying action that you might want to open and close it several times just for the enjoyment of doing so. Inside, you'll find twin USB-A ports and a wireless phone charging mat. Ticket clips decorate the sun visors, and there's a deep bin between the seats with a 12-volt socket, though Genesis has forgotten to give its lovely lidded top a ratcheting mechanism so it could function as an armrest. Time to take a look in the rear. Now, here's another thoughtful touch. Clamshell door bottoms, which wrap underneath the car to protect the inside sill from road grime and so prevent stains or dirt being transferred to occupants' clothing when getting in and out. This feature also lowers the step height and widens the foot access space to allow easier and safer access to the car, particularly for children. The back seats conform to the class norm with comfortable space for two, but the promise of a bit of a squash for any more unfortunate third centre occupant, whose feet would need to be splayed either side of this medium-height centre transmission tunnel. Headroom's very class competitive, even with a sunroof fitted. Legroom not quite so much, and unfortunately it can't be improved by the kind of seat-based sliding functionality you'd get in this class from, say, an Audi Q5. The seat backs do recline, though, for greater comfort on longer journeys. One really nice touch that premium rivals should copy is the provision on the front passenger seat side of slide and recline controls for that front seat, so that rear folks seated on the off side of the car, when there's no passenger ahead, can easily give themselves more legroom. Quite a few family-orientated GV70 customers will specify the optional second row comfort seat pack, which gives you heated upholstery back here, plus side window blinds, laminated rear glass and a 220-volt AC converter. Avoid entry-level trim, and you also get these 3-zone climate controls below the twin centre vents. And if you've ticked the box for those lovely illuminating backlit door trimming panels, they extend back here too. These slim rear quarter lights let in a bit of welcome extra light, and standard touches include twin USB-A ports, netted seat backs, cup holders in this central armrest, coat hooks in the grab handles, and overhead reading lights. Let's finish with a look out back, where, as you'd expect, the boot is accessed by a powered tailgate, though there doesn't seem to be provision for a kick-action sensor to operate it. So here's the main part of the car where you'll really notice the difference between this and its larger GV80 SUV stablemate. That model's 735-litre capacity falling to 542 litres here. That's fractionally less than you get in a BMW X3 or in an Audi Q5 with the seats pulled right back. Golf club bags and pushchairs will be accommodated easily. As we said earlier, you can't alter the seat base position here, but you can change the angle of the seat back, which in a more vertical position might just enable the odd awkward suitcase to be shoved inside in a way that would allow the powered tailgate to shut. You lug your items in over this impractically silvered loading lip, and there's further storage space below the non-adjustable floor, though not enough for a spare wheel, and most of it will be taken up with stowing the rather cheap-looking tonneau cover. A luggage net's provided for the 4 tie-down points, and you get bag hooks, lights on either side, and a 12-volt socket on the right, where there's also a netted storage area. Disappointingly, as with rival Volvo and Lexus models in this segment, the rear seat back only splits 60-40. The 40-20-40 split arrangement of an X3 or a Q5 in this class is so much more convenient. There's no ski hatch either, so if you've rear-seated passengers, longer items will have to go on the roof. There are sidewall catches to flatten the rear bench, which when activated free up 1,678 litres. At the time of this test in spring 2022, prices started at just under £40,000 for the 206 bhp 2.2-litre diesel model. The starting point for the 300 bhp 2.5-litre petrol turbo model we're trying here is £41,000. In either case, that gets you base premium line trim. It's £2,350 more for sport line trim or £3,370 more for top luxury line spec. There's also a full EV version too, with 483 bhp. Expect a price in the region of around £60,000 for one of those. So what about the value proposition of the GV70 combustion models compared to obvious class rivals? Well, if you take the base diesel GV70 variant as your comparison point, at around £40,000 you need about £3,000 more for a base BMW X3 or Audi Q5, about £4,000 more for a base Mercedes GLC, and about £7,000 more for a base Porsche Macan. You'll also need to pay more for baseline versions of rival segment SUVs like Jaguar's F-Pace, Alfa Romeo's Stelvio, Volvo's XC60 and the Lexus NX. And with all the models just mentioned, you'll need to spend a lot more to get a comparable level of equipment that's fitted with the GV70. Genesis doesn't have a network of UK dealerships. Instead, everything is done via so-called Genesis Studios, which will be shop fronts in upmarket shopping centres. One's already been opened in London and others will follow, but you don't have to go to one of those. You simply connect with Genesis online, then you'll be allocated your own Genesis personal assistant who will take you through the sales process from test drive to delivery, and they'll deal with aftercare as well. This assistant won't be salaried on commission as an ordinary car salesperson would be, so you won't get any hard sell. Let's get to some equipment specifics and start with features fitted across the range. You get electronic control suspension, adaptive damping, along with a drive mode select system and the brand's smart cruise control setup. Plus, of course, the expected executive niceties like LED headlights, keyless entry, a powered tailgate, also headlamps and wipers, all-round parking sensors, power folding mirrors and laminated side glass. Inside, the standard GV70 spec gives you an 8-inch dashboard cluster TFT display, but you'll probably want to upgrade that, and we'll tell you how in a minute. All models come with dual-zone climate control, a rear-view camera, a dash top trimmed in stitched leatherette, an electrochromatic rear-view mirror, and powered adjustment for the front seats and steering wheel. Infotainment's taken care of by a 14.5-inch central screen, which includes Apple CarPlay and Android Auto smartphone mirroring, a 9-speaker premium DAB audio system and voice recognition. This setup incorporates over-the-air updates, and you can activate calendar synchronization from your Google or Apple account directly into the infotainment system, allowing you quick and easy access to your appointments. You also get a suite of Genesis connected services activated via an app. It's always an app, isn't there? This allows you to monitor various aspects of your GV70 from your smartphone. The doors can be remotely locked or unlocked, diagnostic tests can be run, and live information like the current fuel level or state of battery charge can also be viewed. It's also possible to monitor individual journeys, allowing drivers to refine their technique to deliver greater efficiency. So, those are the common features across the GV70 range. Now, how does spec tally vary by trim level? Well, if you opt for base premium line spec, the equipment roster we've just covered will be complemented by 19-inch wheels and leatherette upholstery. If you can afford to stretch up to either mid-range sport line or top luxury line trim, you'll also get heated front seats, a heated steering wheel, 3-zone climate control, ambient lighting, electrochromatic wing mirrors, and a premium air filter. Bear in mind that all those features can be added into a premium line model by ticking the box for an affordable convenience pack. Ideally, though, you'll probably want to upgrade from base trim, possibly to this sport model, which gets a more dynamic look thanks to a dark chrome front grille with a wider bumper grille below, a black door belt line and black finishing on the doors, plus a unique design of 19-inch wheel. Top luxury line trim, meanwhile, is set apart by larger 21-inch wheels. Across the range, there are some key options available that Genesis wants customers to consider. First and foremost is the Innovation Pack, which gives you a larger 12.3-inch instrument binnacle screen with 3D graphics, plus a head-up display, a surround view monitor camera system, dual front adaptive LED headlamps, a wireless phone charger, front parking sensors, and a remote smart parking assist feature, which allows you to park the car while standing outside it using buttons on the vehicle's key fob. The Innovation Pack additionally gives you a wider package of camera safety kit, which we'll brief you on in a moment. What else? Well, there's an optional powered sunroof. You can also have fingerprint reader authentication for the central screen, and keen drivers will want the optional eLSD limited slip differential for extra cornering traction. Otherwise, all the other key options require you to stretch to either sport line or luxury line trim. Chief among these is the Comfort Seat Pack, which upgrades the driver's seat to Ergo Motion status, which means it alters support according to drive mode and adds extra adjustment, plus both front seats gain cooled ventilation. If you wish, you can go further and add softer Napa leather upholstery and a suede headliner too. It's possible to pay extra for top-end Lexicon audio systems and rather snazzy backlit interior trim, and you might want to add a second-row comfort seat pack, which gives you heated rear seats, rear side window curtains, laminated rear glass, and a 220-volt AC inverter. Bear in mind that before you spend too much on all this sort of stuff, that you'll probably have to pay extra for your choice of paint colour. The only standard shade is solid Alta White. Avoid base premium line spec and you get a wider colour choice, like this deep metallic Mauna Red shade, which is exclusive to Sportline spec. You might want to complement the chosen colour with a wheel upgrade. The larger 21-inch rims are available to premium line and sport line customers. Equal care is needed with colour choice inside. All trim lines offer the upholstery in obsidian black with an alternative of vanilla beige for the premium and luxury variants, or this test car's rather extravert Sevilla red for the sport model. In addition, you can have upholstery in ultramarine blue with sport spec, or with luxury spec, get it in Havana brown, pine grove green or velvet burgundy. Right, enough with options, let's look at safety. Now, as you'd expect, as standard on the GV70, there's a decent package of camera safety kits, starting with the usual forward safety active assist braking system, here designated FCA, or Forward Collision Avoidance Assist, a setup that detects pedestrians, cyclists and other vehicles in close proximity. The FCA setup also includes a junction turning feature that anticipates oncoming traffic you might be about to turn out in front of at junctions. You'll be warned if that's about to happen, and if necessary, the car will be braked to avoid a collision. And what else? Well, there's also an LKA, or Lane Keeping Assist safety feature, which supplies subtle steering lock if you drift out of lane or drift too close to the edge of the roadway. And a Lane Follow Assist setup that keeps you a safe distance behind the vehicle ahead, combining with an HDA, or Highway Driving Assist feature, to automatically adjust the car's speed to suit surrounding traffic. There's also lane change oncoming and lane change side warning systems, and an evasive steering assist feature to actively turn the car away from a potential collision. As well as all that, Intelligent Speed Limit Assist uses the car's traffic sign recognition function to automatically set your speed to the prevailing local limit. And of course, you get all the usual passive safety features for traction, stability and braking, plus a full suite of airbags, including a centre airbag, along with a driver's knee bag and driver attention warning, which constantly monitors your driving reactions for drowsiness, which, if detected, will prompt a warning to stop for a restorative coffee. An e-call setup will alert the emergency services with your GPS location if the airbags go off in an accident, and there's also a tyre pressure warning system. If you want more, then that optional innovation pack we mentioned adds an active rear assist, reverse parking collision avoidance assist feature that alerts you to people, objects or other vehicles when you're reversing out of a space. The innovation pack also includes a rear seat alert feature, which reminds drivers to check the rear seats when exiting the vehicle, and blind spot collision avoidance assist, which stops you from pulling out dangerously in the face of oncoming traffic, if necessary, braking to avoid a collision. Also, the forward collision avoidance assist system gains an extra element, a crossing feature, able to detect vehicles crossing in front of you that might be a hazard. Plus, you also get blind spot collision avoidance assist, which stops you from pulling out dangerously in the face of oncoming traffic, if necessary, braking to avoid a collision. This functionality also upgrades the car's highway drive assist system to a level 2 status that promotes a limited level of highway-based autonomous driving and can help you while changing lanes or during evasive driving with a lane change assist system that works when you activate the indicators. If you're expecting a 2-ton, 4.7 metre long combustion-powered SUV to be economic, then you're being a tad unrealistic, even if you permanently use it in the blue-tinged eco-drive mode and you decide to ignore the current climate zeitgeist and order it with a 2.2-litre turbo diesel unit that Genesis defiantly offers for the time being. This manages up to 40 mpg on the combined cycle and up to 185 grams per kilometre of CO2, which at least is halfway realistic, even if this black pump fuelled model does fall into expensive benefit in kind tax band J. The premium line spec version of the diesel GV70, by the way, is the only combustion model in the range that qualifies for the lower £155 level of annual road tax because its price is under £40,000, or was at the time of this test in spring 2022. Though if you add the optional innovation pack to that base black pump variant, as most owners will want to, you'll be back to the higher VED tax level that applies to every other model in the range, which is £355 more a year. That's £490 per annum in total. As for petrol power, well, it's hard to understand why Genesis isn't offering the full hybrid HEV or plug-in hybrid engines here that the Hyundai Motor Group uses for its comparably sized Kia Sorento and Hyundai Santa Fe SUVs, particularly as, to be frank, the efficiency figures for this conventional 2.5-litre petrol model aren't very realistic. Bests of 29.7 mpg and 216 grams per kilometre of CO2, which in our experience you'd hardly ever get near to replicating. The BIK tax band is K, and the time is rapidly approaching when it simply won't be viable to sell a family car with those sorts of figures, unless it happens to be a lot more performance orientated than this one. Which of course Genesis knows, which is why it won't launch any further combustion cars after 2025 and will only sell EVs from 2030. With that in mind, you'd be surprised if the GV70 range didn't have a full EV variant, and of course it does. In this form, the car gets twin electric motors powered by a 77.4 kilowatt-hour battery, which, when fully charged, delivers a rather unremarkable 249-mile WLTP-rated driving range. As with all EVs from the Hyundai Motor Group, the powertrain's underpinned by an 800-volt electric architecture, which means that, unlike most of its rivals, the car can use ultra-fast 350-kilowatt chargers, such as those provided by Ionity. In the unlikely event you can find one of those, a 10 to 80% battery top-up will take just 18 minutes. A V2L feature is available to supply up to 3.6 kilowatts of power from the battery pack to charge auxiliary devices, say a drone or an electric scooter, for instance, or even another EV. Whichever GV70 variant you decide upon, like every Genesis, it'll come covered by a generous 5-year care plan, which includes scheduled servicing for 5 years or 50,000 miles. With each service visit, Genesis will collect and return the car to your door. And this also applies to any necessary work required, including warranty work. You simply contact your Genesis personal assistant to make it happen, who can also arrange a courtesy car. Try asking for any of that to be included in the price from a rival premium brand model. The 5-year care plan also includes updates to in-car navigational maps, and there's complimentary subscription to Genesis Connected Services, which will allow you to access information services from your phone to digitally enhance your ownership experience. Insurance is Group 40D for the diesel premium line version, or 41D for the same car with sport line or luxury line trim. Another disincentive to choose this petrol model is that groupings rise to 44D across the trim range. As for residuals, well, industry experts CAP reckon that after 3 years and 36,000 miles, this 2.5-litre sport line spec petrol model will be worth £24,450. That's 58% of original value, a reasonably competitive class showing. If the last few years have taught us anything, it's that it's time to do something different. That should certainly apply to the factors that influence our purchase decisions. And take the choice of a car of this kind. The German establishment in this class focuses on technology and drive dynamics. This Genesis can offer that too, but the emphasis here is more on comfort and the ownership experience. Those things ought to matter more for customers in this sector. That's what Genesis is hoping for anyway. If those promises are enough to get you into the driving seat of a GV70, we think you'll find plenty to like, particularly if you're a private buyer. This is more than just a car for someone who wants to be a bit different. It's better built than most of its rivals, nicer inside than a Mercedes GLC or BMW X3, better to drive than an Audi Q5 or a Lexus NX, and arguably more interesting than a Volvo XC60 or a Jaguar F-Pace. It's also quieter, better equipped, and more affordable than any of the rivals just mentioned. OK, so people will wonder what you've bought, but isn't that a good thing? Are there issues here? Well, yes, this car needs a wider range of engines and some combustion-orientated electrification options, especially for the rather thirsty petrol units we've been trying during this test. And the range of the full electric version could do with being a bit longer. Otherwise, though, looking at the Genesis brand's first wave of new models, you'd have to say that this is one of the most appealing. No, you can't attack the corners in a GV70 as perhaps you could in an X3 and in the kind of way you'd certainly want to in a Porsche Macan. But few segment customers are interested in doing that anyway. What they want is a car that prioritises their brand values rather than its own makers. This Genesis, rather cleverly, does exactly that.